Rodgers on the move. End zone for Adams. He's got it. Touchdown.
They're going to have a defensive end out there.
3rd and 1. Rodgers under pressure again and just has to flip it, and it is going to be gone.
Jones has 98 of them. Play fake here, though. Rodgers going for it all, looking to break it open. He's got it. Lazard's going to go. Touchdown. They're able to change.
Ladies and gentlemen, what is going on? Welcome to another edition of the Titletown Lounge podcast. I am your host, Rhino. You can find me on Twitter at Sports Talk Rhino. Of course, I am joined by my co-host, Brandon. You can find him on Twitter at Wisco_Brandon. And today we are joined by a very special guest, Eric Edholm of Yahoo Sports. You can find him on Twitter at Eric_Edholm. Eric, buddy, what's going on? Thank you so much for joining the podcast. How are you, sir?
Yeah, gentlemen, it's good to be here. I'd have a better background. I usually don't sit here for podcasts, but I cracked out all my old baseball cards that I'm trying to sell, and they're like scattered all over my desk. So you don't get the full view. You get my daughter's drawings behind me. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I gotta ask quickly. What is your best of your collection that you're trying to get rid of?
That's a good question. I've got I have mostly ungraded stuff. So it's like I have some 86 Fleer basketball that might be a 9 or, you know what I mean? Pretty close. So those would be in the running. So I'm trying to think. I've got a 71 Topps Thurman Munson that's in really good shape. That's a hard card to find. So that's a pretty good one. I bought that one when I was a kid, and I think I spent like $25 back in 1988 or something. That was a lot of money to me back then, so it's held up pretty well.
That's awesome, man. I used to be a huge avid baseball card collector. It's really blown up again, baseball cards have.
I've actually been doing a little bit for Yahoo too. Just been writing about the collectible industry just to kind of branch out a little bit. And like you, I'd gotten out of the 20 plus years. I wasn't really into it, but it has. I don't know how long it'll last, but it's here for now.
I'm gonna have to crack my collection out and see if I got any good ones in there. So tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do at Yahoo Sports. Give us a little background.
Yeah, so I've had 2 stints at Yahoo. I was first there in 2013, left in 17, came back in 19, and then I've been there ever since, obviously. In this most recent spell, my primary area of focus is the NFL draft, but I also do a lot on game days and stuff, and obviously follow the league pretty closely. And like I mentioned, I've been kind of branching out a little bit this summer, trying to do some of the sport collectible stories, and I've done about 3 or 4 so far, and it's been kind of fun. A good little something to distract me during the non-peak season for draft.
Yeah. So do you cover all?
And sometimes I'll go on a show and they'll ask me about the 3rd string guard, and I have to kind of tap dance for a little bit. I may not know every player as intimately as the local folks do, but yeah, I definitely try to keep abreast of all 32 teams what they're doing.
That's pretty awesome. I mean, obviously we're huge fans of the NFL, but we do specify with Packers coverage here on the podcast. So we're going to start with Jordan Love. And what I wanted to ask you to start our show is, what was your pre-draft analysis on Jordan Love going into the 2020 draft?
Yeah, I mean, going into the summer prior to his last year, there was a lot of buzz on him. I'm sure you guys can remember some of it. He had nearly beaten Michigan State and Lansing. He had some big games down the stretch, and all of a sudden you looked, and his touchdown interception ratio was great, completed a decent percentage of his passes, was making big plays. His running ability was certainly a part of his game. I think he scored 7 or 8 touchdowns that second to last year, rather. They made a coaching change, and right from the start of the year, I know he threw for a bunch of yards against Wake Forest, but too many YOLO balls, and it seemed like he was playing kind of loose and freely. And I thought, oh, okay, bad game, whatever. Never quite found his stride that last year, and losing his top tight end, his top running back, 3 pieces on the offensive line, another key wide receiver, definitely affected him. And when I wrote that, when I wrote that story last week on Jordan Love, I think Mike Sanford Jr., who was his OC his last year, definitely mentioned, like, look, Jordan played a certain way because he felt he had to. When they were going up against LSU, they were outclassed top to bottom, and he's and he made some beautiful throws. He also made some regrettable ones. So it felt like a lot of that. It reminded me so much of scouting Josh Allen his last year at Wyoming. I mean, look at his numbers that last year. It was embarrassing. Not embarrassing, but it wasn't good, So he was a tricky evaluation from that standpoint, and you had to really focus on the tools and ask yourself, how high is the ceiling?
We have argued on the show in the past that if Jordan Love played for an Alabama, an Ohio State, a Clemson, that he would have been the number 1 overall pick in that 2020 draft. Do you think that is a fair analysis of him?
Well, ask yourself this. What if Tua Tagovailoa had played at Utah State? I mean,
that's exactly what we said, actually, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he's the 5th pick in the draft or whatever. So I definitely believe that where you come from matters. Carson Strong from Nevada may go through that this year. Some of the other quarterbacks at Arkansas State and places like that are certainly going to face that stigma. Then again, we have Trey Lance at North Dakota State. We have Carson Wentz, who went, high in the number 2. So it's going to depend on a case-by-case basis. I think had Love come out and just balled out without that great cast around him that last year, I mean, it would have been fascinating to see, could he have climbed that ladder a little bit? Could he have gone a little higher? Would the Packers have been interested in trading up even more? I mean, I don't know. Those are fair questions because – yeah, I mean, I could see the case that if he was on a team like Bama with all those receivers, I mean, look, Mac Jones threw half his passes were screens this year, and that really helped him, and so that definitely matters.
Well, you look at you look at LSU and Alabama, and they had a combined, I think it was 5 or 6 of those wide receivers ended up in the first round of the last 2 drafts, so they were obviously throwing to much more talented guys than Utah State had. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, look, you had Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, what's his name? Jalen Waddle.
Yeah, Jamar Chase in LSU.
Yep. Monte Smith, Jamar Chase,
Yep.
And Marshall went in the 2nd round this year. Last year, Justin Jefferson. I mean, those teams were absolutely loaded. You say to yourself, how do you defend that, number 1? But number 2, how much help can those guys give a talented quarterback versus one who was in a tough situation like that? So you always have to ask yourself, just because you see a guy on tape dominating, well, who's he going against? Who are his teammates? I mean, those are questions that you have to kind of, that scouts have said, those things matter absolutely.
So in Jordan Love's final year, obviously his statistical production plummeted. How much of that was personnel and coaching related? And in your analysis of him going into the draft, how much of that was actual Jordan Love related?
Yeah, there was take the BYU game, for instance. That's one that I remember pretty vividly watching. And he was constantly flummoxed, it seemed, by zone defense. And especially the depth that those linebackers were able to get quickly. It just seemed to throw him off. I remember watching Justin Herbert. I think it was against Arizona State, and they were dropping 8. They were playing zone, and it was kind of driving him nuts a little bit. You think zone, just pick him apart, but if you're used to kind of leveraging man defense, or you have routes that are kind of designed to be man beaters, you're kind of stuck. So some of that can be play calling, but it's also on the quarterback to adjust and take the check down or take something else or maybe try to stress the defense in a little bit of a different way. So, yeah, I mean, looking at Love, I mean, the BYU game, when he was asked when it required him to feather the ball kind of over the linebackers' heads, essentially, he wasn't able to do it. And so that's one game, that's one snapshot. You can't just make a statement about him. But there were a lot of fastballs, and I want to see some change-ups and want to see him not just be able to manipulate the arm angle and throw on the run, but also change up the trajectory of the ball and how it gets layered in there.
Brandon, did you want to hop in here before we go to OTAs?
Yeah, I just, back onto the Jordan Love and Eric. So nice to meet you on the screen here. We're Facebook friends, but now
that's right.
We're
official new friends now, right?
We're official new friends, and again, thank you for hopping on and taking some time out of your morning. Looking at Jordan Love, I'm a homer when it comes to my sports teams, and I tend to defend them more so than anything else. I'm finding myself defending Jordan Love a lot more this year, obviously with the absence of Aaron Rodgers and the drama that's kind of going on in Green Bay.
Yeah.
You're seeing a lot of pro comps to Patrick Mahomes when it comes to Jordan Love. Now, obviously, people aren't going to say he's going to be the next Jordan or the next Patrick Mahomes, but his playmaking ability, his strong arm, the ability to get out of the pocket. When you're watching the tape on Jordan Love, what stands out to you? Like when you see him like 6'4", 225, like he's got the build, he's got the size. Like what's something that sticks out to you with Jordan Love?
Yeah, definitely the arm talent. I mean, he could sling it. This is a kid who knows how to throw the football and throw some gorgeous looking throws. He can back shoulder, he can throw the fade, he can do different things, and that's a pretty good thing to start with, right? You can teach some of the kind of the fundamentals and the basics. It was a quote that I couldn't quite fit in to my story last week, but it was one that kind of stuck in my head. When Love got off to a tough time in camp last year, it was funny because we just talked about what Love felt he needed to do his last year at Utah State, which was, throw the hero balls and try to get a play out of something because the station-to-station football wasn't going to work. It's like he didn't do that last year. Matt LaFleur called him out on it. He basically said, if you see it, take it. Go for the jugular, and I wonder if he didn't come in, I don't want to say intimidated or what, but I wonder if he came in just a little bit kind of passive.
Mm-hmm.
If he gets back to that attacking style, we know obviously Green Bay has pretty good weapons, right? They got a great tight end. They got a great wide receiver. They have a stable of running backs. The offensive line's in really good shape. So the surrounding cast should be pretty good. It's that fine line between not forcing the issue and also not playing passively to where you're just taking whatever they give you. At some point, you got to hit the gas. So I think he's got the ability to do that. What scares me is that with a lot of quarterbacks like this, you get compared to Mahomes and they start feeling like they need to sort of fulfill that, like, all right, I'm going to throw this one behind my head, left-handed under my butt, whatever. So I think there are times when he gets a little too cute and makes it a little tougher on himself.
And we're looking at, and real quick, and we'll jump to the next topic, but we're kind of looking at, and I've made the argument on Twitter, on Facebook. I tell all my guests, all of our guests, that Twitter and Facebook is the dark web, especially those Facebook groups. Yes. So people also got to understand, and Packer fans especially, that this is essentially Jordan Love's rookie year. He did not go through OTAs, mini camps, no preseason last year. So I think seeing a jump from what we heard from last year into this year, and hearing about a lot of the throws that he's making, a lot of the beat reporters are tweeting out that some of the throws are just on the money and phenomenal. I think given a true offseason and a true preseason, we're going to see much more of Jordan Love, and I think we're going to see a lot better player going into the next season.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, obviously, last year was such an unusual year for so many people, but especially for a guy like Love, who was the number 3, didn't get the OTA reps. Everything was mental reps. It was just film room, maybe some scout team duty. You guys can probably tell me what all he did last year, but not a lot, right? So it was a little bit concerning. And like you said, it was almost like he was redshirting an injury or something, because he really didn't play that much, except here and there in spots in practice, I'm guessing. So I asked Matt Wells, who's now at Texas Tech, but was his head coach to begin his Utah State career. And remember, Love, one FBS offer. Like, he was the skinny kid, 6'2", 170, who grew into 6'4", 220. And his redshirt year, Wells said, it was a lot of just sort of building a foundation of like knowledge and coverage and fronts and routes. And he said for Jordan, it was really important to understand the why. Like, not only just like, okay, this guy runs a post, this guy runs a deep over, why are we doing this? Okay, this is a levels concept. We're doing this because we want to give 3 options, I mean, those are the things that I think, everybody learns differently, but I think once he sort of grasped the why portion of it, this is what those coaches were telling me, everything started coming a little smoother for him. So I'm guessing he was underwater last year. And that's what Wells said. He said, when we first got here, we had to teach him a lot of stuff, but by his redshirt freshman year, he was ready to supplant a senior starter at QB. That's pretty good, even for the Mountain West. So I found that quote pretty interesting, just to hear him say that basically he did gain something out of his redshirt freshman year or redshirt year in college. And I'm guessing it'll be subtle, but you'll see some stuff that obviously he was able to pick up in the offseason, and just being around the guys for a year helps. And so, that could all put together towards progress.
Now, speaking of progress, moving forward into the OTAs, we saw Jordan Love when OTAs very first started, the absence of pretty much the entire wide receiver core for Green Bay. He was playing with a lot of practice squad guys. Obviously struggled in that first week when the guys all showed up this week. Tuesday was an iffy day, went 12 of 23 in 7-on-7 and 11-on-11 drills. But then Wednesday had an absolute phenomenal day. Completed, I think it was 5 passes over 30 yards. He had a 2-minute drill that ended with a 30-yard touchdown, I believe, to Alan Lazard. So my question is, how much of this so far has been mental with this slow start through OTAs? And, obviously the great day on Wednesday, is it a mental thing for him going into his first actual preseason? How much of it is mental? How much of it is where he is in the system?
Yeah, I mean, there could be a physical element too, right? I mean, you're just not used to taking that many snaps, at least not since you're it's been 2 years essentially. So there may be a little bit of the physical out. He could come in and his arm might not be quite up to speed or something. But yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the biggest thing. And not having all those guys there does hurt, as you guys know. You're trying to build chemistry with the ones. Well, the ones may be guys who aren't around in August 30th. So that's a fine line there, and I understand those guys got to take care of their situations and everything, and I don't see that as a big problem. Plus OTAs, a lot of coaches have sort of told me, it depends team on team, team by team rather, but it's often a teaching camp more than it is an evaluation camp. It's great that Love had the bounce back day on Wednesday, and you guys got to see the flashes of what he did. And, I keep coming back. I mean, I was at the LSU game that he played his senior year. He was even maybe up until a couple weeks before had been more hyped than Joe Burrow was at that point. So I kind of circled that one on the calendar in like July, got my boss to sign off on it. I just said, look, these could be 2 first-round quarterbacks. I went there, and there were 2 GMs there. It's kind of interesting in retrospect. Duke Tobin, sorry, I was blanking on his name, the Bengals de facto GM, I guess, and Brian Gutekunst was there along with John Eric Sullivan. So Packers sent 2 guys to a game that had a quarterback on one side, a quarterback on the other, and a lot of talent. And that game was rough because he didn't throw a touchdown. He had 3 picks in the game. But I still remember that he had 2 35-ish yard completions in the first half. And both throws were gorgeous. It was really one of those and honestly, it was after that game that I kind of realized it was about Love's 4th game of his year. I said, we really got to look at the high end stuff. Yeah, the negative stuff is gonna really mar his record. However, you look at those throws and say there isn't a throw he can't make. I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Is that where he's going to be at in 2021? Where you can just let it fly and live with the mistakes? I don't know. It's if he does get in there and get a chance, you guys, I'll be curious to hear your thoughts. Do you want him playing aggressively, or do you want him playing somewhere kind of in the middle, or are you going to tend towards, hey, our skill guys will take care of business and he just needs to be a distributor? I don't know. Where do you guys stand on that?
I'm going to be completely – I'm sorry.
No, go
Brandon.
for it. Go for it.
I'm going to be completely honest with you. If Jordan Love is going to be the starting quarterback in 2021 – I want him to be aggressive, and here's why. I believe if he lays back and if he does the simple stuff, they're not going to compete anyways. Yeah. I don't believe that they're going to be good enough to win the Super Bowl in 2021. They do have a roster that can compete with anybody in the NFL outside of the quarterback position. I believe they have one of, if not the best rosters top to bottom. Sure. I want him to be aggressive because if he does end up being the quarterback of the future, if he is the guy that we think he's going to be, let him be aggressive. Let him get those reps under his arm right away. Let him get comfortable right away being aggressive. That way, if you do hit, the late stages of the season in December, he's able to make those plays. He has the confidence to make those plays. And if the plays ultimately aren't there, then the season's not there anyways.
Yep. I think it makes sense.
I tend to disagree. I think there's a couple things with this. First off, I've said it on multiple shows that we've had. Matt LaFleur does not get the credit nationally and locally for implementing the system in which he runs. Now, prior to Matt LaFleur, Aaron Rodgers had a few bad years towards the end of Mike McCarthy. Now, I'm not saying that Matt LaFleur is the reason that Aaron Rodgers won the MVP,
Right.
but his system is very, very beneficial for the quarterbacks. And I think that with Jordan Love, if he does become the day one starter in 2021, I don't think he needs to take the chances. Look, they're going to have multiple looks. You have a top 3, maybe the top running back tandem in the NFL with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. You got an up-and-coming tight end. You got a really good number 1 receiver, arguably the best receiver in the NFL. I don't think he needs to necessarily take chances. I think it's about what the defense gives you. And you heard a lot about him in minicamp last week, that he was taking a lot of checkdowns. And why not? If it's there, if Aaron Jones is great at catching the ball out of the backfield, A.J. Dillon's going to be threat out of the backfield. I don't think necessarily you need to put that pressure on a young quarterback to make those throws downfield. Now, do I want him to take chances? Yeah, and I think he probably will. Matt LaFleur will tell him to, but I don't think he needs to in order for Green Bay to be successful. You're looking at possibly another top 10 defense like they had last year at number 9. I think they're going to take a step ahead this year and be even a little better with their draft class and with the guys that are in a new system. So I think, honestly, if you look around the league from top to bottom in all 3 phases of the game, Green Bay is one of the better rosters in the NFL. And it kind of gets overlooked, Eric, because of Aaron Rodgers. Now, I understand his greatness. I love Aaron Rodgers. I grew up I was born into the Favre era, and I grew up with Aaron Rodgers. So I understand that we're a little bit spoiled when it comes to good quarterbacks. But I think from a roster standpoint, if Jordan Love does step in, and Rhino has said this multiple times, that this is like one of the best rosters he could step into. He's not starting in New York. He's not starting in Jacksonville, or Houston or somewhere like that. He's got guys around him that I think he would be able to be really good and not have the pressure of making those downfield throws every play.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting. I mean, like when Brady got suspended the first quarter of the season 5 years ago, whatever it was, and the thinking was, oh, they're going to drop off pretty hard, and they got embarrassed one game by the Bills. I want to say, and that was, I think, when Brissett was starting a game. But you saw what they were able to do team wise to kind of rally around him. You saw the game plans change a little bit. Maybe the playbook was a little slimmed down. Maybe there was some things that were a little bit different than had Brady been in there. But Jimmy led him to a couple wins early. I think they were 3-1 in that 4-game stretch. And you say to yourself, maybe the roster was better than we realized. The Patriots aren't just a one-man team, right? Or a one-coach team anyway. So, and I go back to, kind of what you were saying there as well, as we debate how aggressive do you be with him if he is the guy. Remember Josh Allen's rookie year. I mean, I don't think he started the whole year. I want to say he started maybe 13 games or something like that. And early on, they had the training wheels on him a little bit. High percentage passes, heavy screen game, things like that, stuff they knew that he could get some confidence with. Frankly, his completion percentage was better, but he didn't play all that great to me. It felt like he had some shackles on him. He gets hurt. I don't remember what the injury was, and then he came back, and his completion percentage dropped, if I remember. But he played better. I mean, there were more big plays. It was a better TD to interception ratio. So I don't know if that's the same deal, because Buffalo's roster is not in 2018 was not comparable to the Packers in 21. But at some point, maybe there is a line where once he has X number of games under his belt, whether it's this year or next year, then you start letting him rip a little bit and see what he can do.
I've made this argument multiple times on the show that no first-year starting quarterback, at least in this generation, no first-year starting quarterback has ever taken over a better roster than what Green Bay is prepared to give Jordan Love day one. Do you think that holds merit?
Yeah, I guess because you wouldn't call Mahomes' rookie year, he took the one start. They were pretty darn good, though, by the time he took over the next year. So that's one of those, like, semantic arguments. I don't know if you put him in that same category or not. But, yeah, I mean, you think about it, most of the – makes sense, right? I mean, most of the quarterbacks – you could argue the same with it depending on when he takes over. But Trey Lance with the 49ers, same kind of deal. Yeah, I mean, that's another team that they get everybody back from injury and everything. Yeah, it's fascinating to see what whether there's that pressure, like I got to live up to these guys that've been here 5-6 years, most of them. Mason Crosby's been here 38. I can't let those guys down, right? So, and I'm replacing Aaron Rodgers, right? I mean, that alone obviously is going to be huge. I think the roster can't go overlooked. There's no doubt. They've done a good job of keeping their big name guys for the most part. A couple let slip through. I think it's pretty strong.
Brandon, did you have any more to add for this segment?
No, I think we pretty much hit everything. I just like Mark Murphy keeps opening his mouth. The Packer fans, Eric, are absolutely divided. It's right down the middle. It's starting to lean towards, and I don't know how you feel about it, and we'll get your thoughts on it. But people are starting to kind of, I don't want to say give in on Aaron Rodgers, but they're kind of just leaning more towards, all right, you proved your point, we're moving on. Like we want, you're here or you're not here, and it seems to be the pulse of Packer Nation is kind of divided, but it's starting to feel like it's more so leaning towards siding, if you had to pick a side, I guess, with the organization. How do you feel about that?
It always feels, no matter where it starts, whenever it's star player versus team, and there's this conflict of any kind, no matter where it starts on the barometer, it always starts trickling back towards the team, at least a little bit in my mind. I could be wrong. I'm sure there's exception here and there, but it always feels like people will start out by saying, yeah, man, screw the team. Aaron Rodgers needs to get his. He's our guy. He's our only chance to win a Super Bowl. You start in that headspace. But then as time goes on and you realize, well, is he going to carry this thing through? Is he going to sit out at age 37 year? You start realizing, well, I'm a Packer fan first, Aaron Rodgers fan second. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of an interesting little cycle, the mind of the fan, if you will. But it always feels like it starts trickling back towards the team at some point. An annoyance that why isn't he here? We need him, right? They're never pretty, they're never ugly. But remind me, I mean, with Favre and Ted Thompson, it was a kind of a different dynamic, was it not?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
I mean, and if Twitter and Facebook,
first, right?
Say that again.
At first, now I have to get my timeline right. You guys would probably remember. Was it not very pro Favre? And then at some point, it kind of shifted. Was it? Correct me if I'm wrong. I can't quite remember, but
when Favre retired, everyone was
like teasing with his retirement and all that, where he was like hinting.
People had the mindset that, all right, make your decision up. Like either you're going to retire or you're not going to retire. And there was a little bit of support behind the Aaron Rodgers draft pick. Like, all right, he's flirting with retirement. We're obviously going to need a quarterback in the future. Sure. We bring in this guy from California who was supposed to be the number 1 overall pick, and he dropped us miraculously in the first round. Then he had that season in 2007 where he took them to the NFC Championship game, and they ultimately should have gone on to the Super Bowl, and I think would have beat the Patriots that year had they won the title game.
Yep,
so there was that sigh of relief when Favre retired. Like, all right, thank you so much for everything you've given Green Bay. Time to move on to Aaron Rodgers. And when Favre made the announcement that he was coming back, when he landed in Green Bay in his private jet, and him and Deanna got off and were walking through the runway, it was almost the entire fan base wide was like, all right, Favre's back. Let's do it again. Let's run it back. No one was on Aaron Rodgers' side.
Wow.
And when Ted Thompson made the announcement, hey, Favre, if you're coming back, you're going to compete with this guy. It actually got to a point where people hated Aaron Rodgers. I remember the first padded practice that Aaron Rodgers was at, he was getting booed by his own fan base.
Crazy.
So I think that situation, it was a lot of pro Favre at first until that very first game against the Vikings. Once he threw that crazy touchdown pass across his body, from I think the 5-yard line, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, this guy might actually be able to ball."
Yeah.
And by the end of that first season, it was pretty much 95% Aaron Rodgers and 5% Favre still.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, it really does. It is funny how it changes over.
And it really,
I remember exactly how that dynamic was. Yeah.
You really saw a little bit of a shift, and like Rhino said, it was very pro Favre, and then you saw it was in middle of the season. I don't remember what week it was. Favre went out of the Cowboys game. Aaron Rodgers came in, and you kind of saw a little bit of what Aaron Rodgers was and who, because we didn't really see a whole lot about it.
It was all mop up before that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It was mop up. Brett Favre was never out of a game, so nobody really had seen him when he came into that Cowboys game and balled out. And obviously was back on the bench the next week. Packer fans, I think that were more pro Favre, were kind of like, well, I guess this isn't the worst thing to see. Yeah. But yeah, it was. I mean, there was petitions to fire Ted Thompson. I mean, they were at his throat. And Andrew Brandt, which I'm sure you're familiar with, when they made that pick with Aaron Rodgers, and he said it on a podcast. I think it was a podcast. And he was like, we knew the fan base was going to be mad. They were coming with the pitchforks and ready to fight. And it was pretty bad. Had Facebook and Twitter been around for that, it would have been, I think, times 10 on what we're seeing right now.
I think Twitter was in its very infancy. I remember signing up in 2009. I can't believe it's been that long. I hate my life. But forget that a minute. I digress. I don't remember it being a thing until about late 08, early 09. So it's sort of right on the edge of that. That's funny. If Twitter never happened, I think we'd all be happier, but that's just me. Yeah,
that's true.
I absolutely 100% agree with you. I mean, it's like Brandon said, it's the dark web. Yeah. I mean, you just see some of the worst stuff on that app from every fan base. I mean, there's not just one fan base. Yeah.
You feel like you're like, it's like you got one foot in the grave or something like that, and you can't pull it out. I mean, you have to keep coming back. It's such a trap. It's awful.
So moving forward, one last question I want to ask you about Jordan Love before we move on to the rest of the Packers roster. If Jordan Love is to be the day one starter, based off of your analysis of Jordan Love, what you've seen so far with his progression in the system, what are the Packers' odds of competing in 2021 with Jordan Love as a quarterback? What do you see them doing with him under center?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the extra playoff game helps, right, in terms of just, being able to get in and things like that. And, some reasonable questions might be, who's going to challenge him in the division, right? Minnesota's a pretty good roster, but they've got some holes. Kirk Cousins has a ceiling to what he can do, I think. This is just my opinion. Maybe if the defense rebounds and Dalvin Cook's healthy, okay, now we got an interesting little debate. Mm-hmm. How much better are the Bears with assuming Justin Fields takes over at some point relatively early in the season? I don't know. I wrote a piece saying when are the rookie quarterbacks going to take over? And I think I picked week 5 or 6 or something. They have a couple of tough games right after the Cleveland game. I said, all right, Andy Dalton's going to get pummeled by the Browns, and then Fields takes over. And I don't know how good that Bears team is. I don't think it's terrible. They're in that sort of with subpar quarterbacking. They've been in that 7-9, 8-8 range, which makes you think maybe the roster's not terrible, right? I mean, they've got Khalil Mack, and they've got some other pieces. The offensive line could be in better shape this year. Allen Robinson's great, et cetera, et cetera. Are they ready to beat a Jordan Love-led Packers team? I don't know if I'm quite there yet. So they're probably no worse than second or a very, very good third team in the division, and they could win it. So, I would think they're in the discussion as one of the, 7 or 8 best teams in the NFC still, even if he has those games where, 1 touchdown, 3 picks, doesn't play great.
So you could still see them as a fringe playoff team in 2021.
Yeah, 10-7. Sure, absolutely. That wouldn't shock me. And I think with you'll see some 9-win teams get in, and you'll see some teams that, like Bears didn't deserve to get in the playoffs last year. It was kind of a fluky thing. There's always 1 or 2 teams like that, and I think the Packers are above that. So I think you'll see growth from him too. I think throughout the season he may start slowly. Again, we don't know. Is he going to be? Who do they play week 1? Seattle? No, not Seattle.
New Orleans.
New Orleans. Yeah, New Orleans.
He was another NFC team. Yeah. So I think they've got New Orleans, and I think Detroit in week 2, if I recall, and then 49ers week 3. So
Pittsburgh week 3.
Pittsburgh week, like I said, Pittsburgh week 3. Another good defense, though. I mean,
it is. Yeah.
So that's a tough chore early, and then at some point he's going to probably get comfortable if he's the guy. But yeah, I still think they would be in that mix.
Okay, fair enough. We're going to move on to the rest of the Packers roster. What were your thoughts? What was your analysis on the Packers 2021 draft class?
Okay, I was going to say, we're not going to go through all 89 guys now, are we?
No.
My kids are demanding my presence upstairs. Yeah. I didn't love it, to be totally honest. It seemed to get better, and I'm going to try to pull up their picks as I talk here because I don't remember every single one of them. But, it was one of those things kind of like last year where I said to myself, okay, I didn't love some of the early stuff, but as the draft went on, more of the picks seemed to make sense. I mean, look, I'm not a huge Eric Stokes fan. He's a phenomenal athlete, but from what I saw, he needs some work. And I think there's a lot to work with, but I don't know what he gives you year one. And that just, and that's okay. Not everybody has to be that year one contributor, but that concerns me a little bit. When I watched Josh Myers, I sort of was left wanting a little bit more. I understand he brings some things to the table that are like Corey Linsley, that aren't necessarily. He's not going to guy that may not blow you off the screen and things like that. The Ohio State offensive line had some communication errors that I thought kind of marred my evaluation. It was like, well, who's at fault here? The guard, the center. Mm-hmm. It was a little tricky at times. I really liked Amari Rodgers, and I'm hoping I can pull up their draft before I forget who their fourth pick was. But I think he'll be a really nice Randall Cobb-ish type player. That was a smart pick, great value, loved it. They got the big nose tackle from Florida. Tadarius Slayton kind of caught my eye a few times. You don't see those massive 340-pound noses that much anymore, but he's got a little wiggle to him. And I almost kind of wonder if he didn't lose a couple more pounds, maybe he's a little more dynamic and adds more to the pass rush or something like that. Some other guys, though, I thought were ones that I liked. Isaiah McDuffie's a good little player. I think he'll stick around. Kylan Hill, I think, is going to be tough to keep off the field. He's had some character questions that have kind of plagued him at two different schools. If it's one school, you say to yourself, hey, maybe the coaches are jerks. Maybe the player's not at fault. When you hear it from multiple staffs, you tend to think there may be something there. So I think he'll probably fall in line. He's a 7th-round pick. He was one of the last picks in the draft, if he makes it, right? But, man, he's a big back. He's got a little, like, Kareem Hunt in him or something. I don't know. I mean, he
catches the ball really well, too. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Really good receiver for that size. So, I'm nobody else that I really love. Royce Newman's a pretty valuable guy. He can play multiple spots. I don't know if they're planning on moving Van Lanen inside or if he's going to be a tackle. He was a functional player for Wisconsin. I thought he was solid. Am I forgetting anybody here?
Shamar Jean Charles, the
Jean Charles, the French quarter via Appalachian State. Really kind of a big, interesting guy. I mean, he seemed to get his hands on a lot of balls, and I thought that was really interesting about him, and kind of a player that caught my eye more than once. And I what do you have, like 20 passes defended last year or something in 12 games or whatever? It was pretty impressive. So didn't make a lot of plays. He didn't make a lot of interceptions and things like that, but pretty good length. I mean, I was for about a 5'11" guy, I think he had decent arm length and he went about where I expected, I would say.
Yep.
So with the Eric Stokes analysis, I respectfully disagree with Eric Stokes in terms of what he can give the team in 2021. I mean, one of the biggest problems Green Bay struggled with defensively, outside of Jair Alexander, is their cornerback's ability to stay with their guy in press coverage when they're up close. That's why you saw a lot of guys 8 to 10 yards off the ball, off the line of scrimmage. I think one of Eric Stokes' strengths was his ability, not just his speed, but his ability to turn his hips in motion and stay with his guy down the sideline. I think that is something that he could come in day one and overtake Kevin King and play opposite side of Jair Alexander in 2021. I mean, am I stretching here? Am I being a homer? Or, is that something that could potentially be possible?
Yeah, there were times, and, you saw it on routes in college, too, where the ball was going the other way. They played a good amount of man. Excuse me one second. But, there were times when he shadowed some guys pretty darn well. It felt like maybe his trouble came at the top of the routes sometimes. He kind of, get his hips flipped in the wrong direction, or his footwork was a little messed up or something like that, or, losing maybe like the physical battle a little bit. He's a little wiry, a little lean, but, that speed and that quickness is undeniable. I mean, it's rare. And the good thing too is that the Georgia staff was they really gave good notes to scouts on both those guys, on Tyson Campbell and Eric Stokes, because there were some question marks, like, some of these guys wouldn't play the entire game, or you had them only playing one spot. What was going on? They were just so talented back there. I mean, they had about 8 DBs who are going to end up on NFL rosters on last year's team. So, that was kind of part of it too. And you tend to notice kind of the big plays. I mean, obviously, it's great that he had 2 pick sixes last year, I think, and a decent number of picks total. But you also saw some of the ones where he allowed big plays as well. So do I think he has a higher upside than Kevin King? I think that's a fair assessment, especially like you said, like on some of those routes where you have to stick with the guy.
Looking at real quick, Eric, looking at that second round pick in Josh Myers. Now, it got a lot of criticism because Creed Humphrey from Oklahoma was also available. When you're looking at those two guys, what were the pros and cons, I guess, if you want to look at it as the Green Bay taking over Josh Myers? I like Josh Myers over Creed Humphrey. Number one, because I'm a homer. Number two, because I like his size, 6'5". I think he's a huge dude. Captain of the Ohio State team last year. But were you higher on Creed Humphrey than Josh Myers?
I was. There was a little bit more physical ability, and both guys have great character, football intelligence. They check all those boxes. Both staffs really kind of signed off on that. And you're right. I mean, he's only played center, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe he's played guard. There is the possibility to move him to guard later if you need him to. And he'll get after you in the run game. That's what I really did like about him. Mm-hmm. It felt like there were some pass protection issues that, again, the question was, was it Wyatt Davis's fault? Was it Myers? Some of those I had to kind of guess and lean on scouts evaluation because, sometimes it's obvious. You guys know, you're watching the tape. Okay, he's supposed to get this guy. Other times, not so much. But the pass protection was something that kind of did I did question a little bit. For all the physicality he brought in the run game, I felt like he played very defensively as a pass blocker at times and didn't really get his hands into guys. Now, I think he has a little bit shorter arms than, if I remember, maybe not textbook arm length, so maybe that has a little something to do with it. He can get a little upright. He's 6'5". He's a big, taller guy, but, good player. I just felt like the body of work that I saw from Humphreys over 2 years, I thought was really, really strong. Not a huge difference, but I would have taken Creed Humphrey.
We've discussed on the show multiple occasions how the center position in Green Bay has really been like a plug and play position. Yeah. The rest of the offensive line is obviously they played at an elite level. They're a top 3 offensive line in the NFL, in my opinion. You got a couple guys there that'll be all pro, I think, in 2021 again. Do you think that'll help Josh Myers year one play at a higher level, playing with one of the best offensive lines in football?
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, anytime you have a situation like that, look at it's apples to oranges, but think about what Tristan Wirfs did last year in Tampa Bay, and they had a pretty solid veteran group, or a quartet of guys who had sort of been around the block a little bit, and they ended up one of the best lines in football. I mean, I don't say it was the best, but it was up there. And Wirfs, other than the Bears game and a couple other moments here and there, was tremendous. I mean, he was really good. And I think the fact that, you weren't starting 2 rookies, there weren't, 6 new faces in the room or a coaching change or whatever. If you have some continuity, it makes the rookie's job a little bit easier. And maybe if there's a veteran lined up next to him, they can help remind him, hey, look, you gotta pinch down on this play. You got to make sure you reach block on this one, or you got to get your footwork different. They can help them, or they can compensate a little bit, and come off their block to assist over there. So I always feel like that continuity up front is huge. And so, what do we got? Bakhtiari at left tackle, the rock of all rocks, right? I mean, he's tremendous. How did he slip to the 4th round, by the way, in that draft? One of the worst drafts.
Yeah.
What do we got at guard? Is Runyon going to be starting at guard?
That's what it's looking like. And
okay.
That's what and as far as mini camp now, obviously Bakhtiari's still in the rehab portion of his ACL tear. Right. But Runyon was at guard. I believe Billy Turner was kicked out at right tackle.
Okay.
So they're kind of doing a little bit. I think probably what it is a lot of experimenting right now, I guess. But John Runyon did play a few games last year, and he played very well actually. For a couple guys that were injured. But you kind of see it with Green Bay, like they don't have the flashiest of drafts. And you mentioned David Bakhtiari. Now nobody, I mean, his going back to his pro day out in Colorado it did not look like the guy was going to be a future Hall of Fame left tackle. I think what Green Bay does more than any other team, maybe in the NFL, and obviously you'll know this better than I do, is they draft and develop, and that's what they do. Like they're going to take guys that fit what they want to do. They want to take guys that have raw talent. Obviously with Jordan Love and even
Rashawn
looking
Gary.
back at Rashawn Gary. You look back with Eric Stokes this year. I think when you look at this team and this organization when it comes to drafting, that's where they're great at. And people do forget, Eric, that Aaron Rodgers was also a pretty raw talent coming out of Cal.
Great point. That's right.
So,
and he had a different arm motion than he threw with, later. I mean, he had that Tedford like right off the ear, and he had to kind of rework that a little bit. And so, I mean, right. I wish some NFL teams could listen to this little portion or the whole thing. But you know what I mean? This discussion about draft and develop and how important it is. We get so impatient, and I'm guilty of it too. I mean, I contradict myself all the time. Like
we all do. Yeah.
I'm 100%.
Yeah, I mean, the draft is this constant balance of, acquiring talent that you can sort of go slowly with. But then again, it's a 53-man roster. This isn't college where, okay, you got 85 other guys. There's a little bit more leeway here. So it is tricky. There is a fine line there. I know people hated the Gary pick at first. They hated the A.J. Dillon pick, and I think their minds have slowly been changed on those. And there's always going to be cases of, he doesn't fit what we need now, but your needs today are tomorrow's weaknesses. Your weaknesses today are tomorrow, so tomorrow's strengths. It's constantly changing. So the big picture, I always say, take the best talent in 3 years from now. Like that's what I ask myself is who could be the best players 3 years from now? And the guys who take those ones, I think, have the most success.
So I want to move towards this particular subject as a guy who covers the draft quite a bit. The value of a draft pick. If Aaron Rodgers is to be traded this year, what kind of return can Green Bay expect out of Aaron Rodgers? What is he worth in terms of 2022 draft picks or beyond that, obviously?
I think it helps that we've seen, in this last generation, Peyton Manning, not, at his advanced age, win a Super Bowl. Tom Brady at his advanced age win multiple Super Bowls. So there's less concern about going for it. Like if Aaron Rodgers were to be, sorry about the shaking the screen, if he were to come available, I think there would be multiple teams interested in the sense that at least we went for it. At least we tried to make that move to make us better. Not all those moves would work out for every team, but it would be fascinating to see George Payton, came from the Vikings for a long time, went to Denver as the GM. He got tormented by Rodgers for a decade, plus more than that, and watching every single one of those games had to think, I'd love to be on his team and not have to play against him. I'd be curious to see, especially after reports that Teddy and Drew Lock have not looked all that great so far. I haven't read in depth, but and I'll say this too. Green Bay made a real late visit with Drew Lock before the 19 draft. They flew him up to Green Bay, 8 or 10 days before the draft or whatever. Even the family was like, what do they want to talk to us for? Like, okay, we'll go, obviously. And they passed on him. They I think passed on him 3 times, if I'm not mistaken. But it was a quarterback who, style-wise, similar to Jordan Love, could see some interest there, possibly. If you got him back, if you got, I would think, at least 3 picks and and possibly a first rounder and more, and maybe another play. I don't know. I mean, I've seen some wild proposals out there where I think, would a team give up 2 firsts and a defensive starter and another player and a lower pick? There are some desperate teams out there that maybe they would. To me, it's a little wild, even for Rodgers. But if you have that chance to win a Super Bowl, there really is no price that matches that. If you know what I mean. Like, there's no price you shouldn't pay, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I just don't see. I mean, I know the organization has came out and said it on multiple times that I just don't think that I don't think he has a trade value. I don't think you trade arguably the greatest talent at the quarterback position. I don't think there's never been an MVP that's been traded following winning the award the previous year. So I just don't see it happening. And when we had Ty Dunn on, we had a couple other writers and insiders, and they said, it would take 3 firsts and X amount of players. I don't even know if that
feels high. I agree.
Yeah. I mean, it's just something out there where it's never been done before. And I don't know if you can really put a price tag on it.
I mean, look, it's so funny sometimes, like what value means to different teams, right? There's some that are very aggressive. They're willing to overpay. The Bears were one of them. They overpay with some of their free agent contracts. They've overpaid with some of their trades they made because they are just dialed in. This is our guy. And there's some teams who just refuse to be fleeced, whether it's Dave Gettleman, the Giants, whether it's Bill Belichick in New England, whoever. You may call them old school, but they're just not going to budge on a certain price. They set a number and they stick to it. This is the number whether it's a contract, whether it's a trade return for value, we're disciplined. We won't go over that mark. Whether it's the right way to do it, I don't know. Maybe it is. But there's always a handful of teams out there that say to themselves, screw it, pushing the chips to the middle of the table. We got a chance to get Aaron Rodgers. Imagine what this could do for our franchise. And there's always that one out there now. Do they need a quarterback? We'll see. The team that acts like that, I don't know. Maybe.
We'll finish the show with this last question. Obviously, the opposite end of the spectrum of trading Aaron Rodgers would be extending Aaron Rodgers and having him stay in Green Bay for a couple more years. If there is an extension in place, if we see that happen over the next couple of years or a couple of weeks, do you think that is the end of Jordan Love in Green Bay?
Ooh, good question. I wasn't thinking about that. Yeah. There aren't too many comps, right? I mean, you'd have to go back to Rodgers, I guess, right? Think about it. Like, if he's extended, that means he's starting this year and definitely next year. And so we're talking about Love sitting for 3 years. It probably does feel more likely that he would be used as a trade bait or something, to try to include him on, or maybe, I don't know. But I hadn't thought about that. That's a good point. And Ron Wolf, as you guys know, used to just acquire quarterbacks just because he could never have enough of them. They're valuable trade pieces. Yeah. And we've even seen like a lightly used Sam Darnold go for 60 cents on the dollar for what they paid, maybe 50 cents, whatever you want to say. They got something in return for him. So, I mean, there's always, if you take that chance, you usually can get something back if they haven't marred their reputation too much. So it's people always need quarterbacks. Although I will say, I think the trend is going to be closer to this past year where we had 5 in the first round. That was an outlier. We haven't had that in a while. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be more of the norm. I think we're going to start seeing teams start to draft more. But if you can get one in the veteran portion of free agency pre-draft and not have to worry about who's going to be there in the draft, maybe you take that chance and it's appealing to somebody. Maybe if a Green Bay assistant on the offensive side of the ball joins another staff and says, man, I watched this kid practice. He's legit. He's come so far the last year and a half. I'm telling you, this is the deal like Tommy Maddox a million years ago or whoever, where he barely ever plays and then becomes a starter somewhere else. I could see it.
Brandon, do you have anything to follow up with?
It's going to be a fun summer, Eric. That's for sure.
But nervous too. For my final question, what happens? What ends up happening? And I keep going back and forth on this thing. I got to pick your brains on this thing.
I said that I'm a homer. I said that Aaron Rodgers will sign an extension to line up with Jordan Love, his first extension for Jordan Love. So Aaron Rodgers will extend for 3 years. I'll push out to Jordan Love's rookie contract. Aaron Rodgers will retire, and Jordan Love will take over. Now, look, Jordan Love is I don't want to say he's a project. I think that's unfair to him, but he needs some developing. I think sitting 2 to 3 years behind the greatest quarterback to throw the ball from a talent perspective is only going to help him. But is it something that Jordan Love wants to do? Does he think that he deserves to start earlier than, that time frame? And the other question I think you could ask yourself, and I think most of us probably have the answer right away, is Brian Gutekunst, Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love, can they all be in the same room together? Do you see that happening down the road? Now, that's my, sunshine and rainbows is to line that up. But I do think that Aaron Rodgers will be back in Green Bay. I think it's going to get dragged out all the way until training camp, but I do eventually think he does come back. Look, he's spoken highly about his legacy in Green Bay. He doesn't want to have an exit like Brett Favre, which is funny because that's what it's turning into. Yeah. So again, with the sunshine and rainbows part, I think Aaron Rodgers extends to match up with where Jordan Love is with his rookie contract, and then Aaron Rodgers will retire. That'll push him to age 41 season, and then he will retire. And then I think Jordan Love will take over.
I'd love to see it. Just selfishly, I love guys who can play with one team and just become, larger than life icon. Favre had his great year in Minnesota, and it was fun to watch. But it would be cool to see this kind of go against the grain a little bit.
Very quickly, I'll share mine. I think Aaron Rodgers comes back for one season, and I think they trade him after 2021, and Jordan Love takes over into it. Yeah.
Also a possibility, and that may end up benefiting Love more, where he gets this little brief kind of test of how do you handle being with the ones and being the guy, and then it's delayed just a little bit more. And that may be the best for Love long term.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Eric, thank you so much for joining us today. We greatly appreciate it here. Once again, you can find Eric on Twitter at Eric_Edholm. He's a part of Yahoo Sports. He covers a lot of draft and NFL coverage. Of course, you can find Brandon on Twitter at Wisco_Brandon. You can find the Twitter page for the show at Titletown Lounge. And of course, I am on Twitter at Sports Talk Rhino. Gentlemen, happy Sunday.
Go
it's
Bucks.
A great day outside, so go Bucks in Game 4. Yep.
All right,
Eric, thank you once again.
Yeah. Have a great time. I appreciate you having me on. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.